So we're continuing on Hilchot Shabbat, Siman Shin Yutet, the halachot of Borer, and we're up to Seif Yud Aleph in Shulchan Aruch, and the Avkuf Mem Bet Amud Aleph of the regular prints of Mishnah Berurah, and in our source sheets that I sent to you, in the pamphlet that we have on page 59. So we're going to speak about hopefully covering 4 Seifim today, Yud Aleph, Yud Bet, Yud Gimel, and Yud Dalet. K'shemesarnin hayayin besudar, says the Shulchan Aruch, Sarich lizaher shlo ya'aseh guma besudar lekabel hayayin mishum shinui. Now we spoke previously about 3 different levels of sifting and straining. One is something that people do not, nobody would eat because of all the unwanted particles that are mixed with it. Imagine a wine that has so much sediment in it that nobody was going to drink it. So that we said you cannot sift, you cannot strain on Shabbat. Then you have something that majority of people would eat it, the way it is, but you want it to be more fine-tuned and cleaned and so on. And that we mentioned that you could do with, not necessarily with, the sifters that you have, and something that everybody would be okay with. If you have something like water or pure wine, and you want to make it a little bit more fine-tuned, a little better, that you could even do with a meshameret, you could even do it with a professional sifter, and there's no problem. Right? So that's the categories that we have. If some people would eat it or drink it, if everybody would, and if nobody would. So that's really, or majority or everybody, that's. And now we're going to deal with those 2 last items. And Shulchan Aruch says, even when you are doing besudar, which is again something that is not fully clean, it has some particles mixed with it. So you cannot do it with an actual professional kli, a sifter, a strainer, but you could do it with a sudar. You could do it with a cloth. That's what we spoke about, right? You could do it with a cloth. That, says the Shulchan Aruch, you should make a shinui to show that this is Shabbat, we're doing it differently. How do you do that? Normally speaking, when you have, let's say, a cup and you want to strain some wine, purify it with a sudar, with a cloth, you deepen the cloth inside the cavity of the cup, and then you pour the wine. This way you could contain some of the wine, and little by little it drips down. That's the normal way that you would do it on a weekday. So because it's a normal way, we want to do it not in a normal way to show that this is different than Shabbat. We make a shinui. You stretch it upon the opening of the cup, and then little by little you pour the wine as the cloth stays stretched and not let it dip in. And that would be the shinui. Right? So that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Now, the Mishnah Berurah says something important, and that is, says the Mishnah Berurah, that's only when you have a wine or a liquid that's not fully clean. And therefore, you need shinui, because whenever you use sudar versus a meshameret, a cloth versus a professional strainer, that's when you need the shinui. But if you could even use a full-fledged meshameret, a real sifter, then you don't need any shinui over here, because, and it's pashut, he says in Sha'ar HaTziyun over here, you don't need something that doesn't look like a mundane activity when the whole thing is not even necessary. The reason that's mutar to use a meshameret is because this is completely purified. Everybody would drink it like that. You want to just fine-tune it a little bit. Therefore, it's mutar. Now, there are those, the Ben Ish Chai in Pashat Beshalach, Otet Zayin, and Shana Shniya, brings this Shulchan Aruch almost verbatim from Shulchan Aruch. I saw in one of the new Mishnah Berurahs, they want to claim that he disagrees with the Mishnah Berurah, and he holds that in any case you need to stretch the sudar upon the cloth, upon the cup. And I don't really know where they get that from. I think it's incorrect understanding of the Ben Ish Chai. Ben Ish Chai is clearly talking about a wine that has some some sediment, some dregs mixed with it, and therefore you need to strain it, you need to sift it. It's not talking about wine that's fully clear and you want to just fine tune it. That's very clear in Hilchot Vav if you want to take a look. So I believe he's saying same thing that is simple that the Mishnah Berurah is saying over here as well. So hence we're going to read the Mishnah Berurah quickly over here. But Sudar rotzeh lomar mashke akur ktzat. It's talking about a drink that is a little bit foggy. It's a little bit mixed with particles that are unwanted particles, and therefore you want to sift them out. That's when you need to make this shinui of stretching the dip and not having that dip inside the cloth, and you want to stretch it upon the opening of the cup. That's when we're talking about. But if you are just fine-tuning a already clear good wine, in that case, you don't need any of that, says the Mishnah Berurah. The mutar lesana. In that case, it will be even mutar to do with the meshameret. You don't need any change with this sudar either, and the shinui in general will be because of ovadin dechol, as we mentioned before. It's a mundane activity which we want to stay away from. So that's as far as the Mishnah Berurah is concerned over here in Seif Yud Aleph, and of course, for a little bit additional clarity, you could take a look at the pamphlet that you have on the top of page 59 as well. We're not going to read through it right now. So it says the Shulchan Aruch in Seif Yud Bet. Kol makom shemutar lesanan yain besudar. Any scenario in which you could sift wine with a cloth, which again means that the wine is drinkable for many, and it just needs to be a little bit sifted. It's not fine-tuned. It has some drags in it, and you want to sift those. So therefore, you cannot use a meshameret, a sifter professionally, but you could use a cloth. Says the Shulchan Aruch, in any scenario in which you could do sudar, mutar lesaneno bichfifa mitzrit. You could also use kfifa mitzrit, which was some sort of fine-tuned basket made out of small lulavim, the branches of palm tree and so on, and they would pour in the things, and it would stop some of the larger particles, and it could be used as some sort of sifter. Now, even though that you could use it as a sifter, but it's not. On weekdays, you would never use that as a sifter. You would use it as an actual sifter, right? So therefore, it would be mutar. It would become like a cloth. It's not a professional sifter, and therefore, any time that sudar is also be permissible, and you could use it on Shabbat. And says the Shulchan Aruch, you have to be mindful that this basket, when you put it inside the kli that you have ready for pouring the wine inside to sift, it should not be elevated from the bottom of the cavity, or the bottom of the kli that you're going to end up with the wine in it. In other words, you have this kli, and you're putting the kfifa inside of it, and now there is a cavity of air which the wine is going to pour in. That should not be a tefach or more. And there's machloket rishonim what exactly the reason for this is. Some say, which is the psak of the Shulchan Aruch, that the reason for that is because of ovdin dechol. Ovadin dechol, it's a mundane thing. Usually you would do it like that if you would want to do that on a weekday. Therefore, just like we spoke about the sudar, that you have to stretch it instead of dipping it in, here also, there's no stretching the kfifa mitzrit. There's a basket that is hardened. So the way you do it is you make sure to not end up with this situation in which you have a tefach in between the two. Mishum shinui. And there are other Rishonim who say no, that's not the reason. The reason is because of ohel. Because you remember when we discussed this in Mashin Debav, that when you have a tefach elevated, and it's a hard item over there, now you created an ohel if it's upon the entire kli. You remember that? Covering a large barrel, versus doing halfway, which is oil or not oil, right? So here, if you do that, then you end up with oil. Now there are nafkaminas that the Mishnah Berurah is going to discuss over here as well in between the two, but that's basically the machloket among the medieval authorities, and Shulchan Aruch sides with the reasoning that this is ubadin dechol, therefore you do it with shinui, and that would be basically fine, right? So let's take a look at the Chafetz Chaim. Bekvifa mitzvit, that you could do this with a kvifa mitzvit. Again, he says first in Ot Mem Zayin over here, and the Shulchan Aruch is coming kol makom. It says any place that you could do with a sudar, you could do with kvifa mitzvit. What does kol makom add? What is it coming to add? Da'afilu yain shoachur k'tzat, da'asur l'sanu b'mshameret, that wine that is a little bit mixed with particles, that you can't use a meshameret for that. You cannot use a professional sifter, strainer. Afilu hachi mutar l'sanu b'kvifa mitzvit. You could still do kvifa mitzvit, because again, during the weekdays, it's not made to be a meshameret, so it's not a kli that's miyuchad for sifting, and hence you could use it on Shabbat. You could also use it for straining water on Shabbat, so long as it's not very dirty. If it's clean water or semi-clean water that most people will have, then it's fine, you could have it, no problems whatsoever. So says the Chafetz Chaim, Kifa mitzrit v'oto kli hasui kenafam shemesanim ba dino k'mishameret. If you have something that does the same job as a sifter, right, then it doesn't have to be called a sifter. Kifa mitzrit is not as good, so therefore you could use it on Shabbat. But if you have a kli made like a sifter, like a nafa, and it's used for sifting, then the halacha would be like a meshameret. You cannot use it because it's miyuchat lekach. It is made for sifting, whereas kviva mitzvit is not made for sifting. It's a basket. You could use it theoretically for a sifter, and hence, when need be on Shabbat, you could actually use that to clarify the drink that you have a little bit more and make it a little more pleasant. Now, mishum shinui, this that you have to make sure the basket does not have that halal tefach over here. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the tam, the reason of Maran of Shulchan Aruch is pretty clear, that you should not be doing it like a regular way. It will be the isur of ovadin dechol. You're doing mundane activities, and therefore it would be asur. Mishum shinui. That's why he says you should make sure to do this mishum shinui. Maran would only say shinui if the problem is ovadin dechol, right? So says the Chafetz Chaim, ulefizeh, according to this reasoning of the Shulchan Aruch, you know what would be mutar? Mayim v'yayin selulim, as we discussed in the previous seif, you need shinui only when it's mutar to do with a sudar, not with a meshameret. If something is mutar even with meshameret, you have pretty clear water, pretty clear wine, and you want to just fine tune it a little bit, which halacha would have it that you could even do that with a meshameret. In that case, do you need to make a shinui? So we just mentioned in the previous seif, you don't need shinui, right? You could dip the sudar nicely, do it the way you do it regularly, and that would be completely mutar. So if you're using kvifa mitzrit, and you want to strain clear wine, you want to just make it a little fine tune. You're sifting clear water, you want to make it a little more pleasant. So do you need to make shinui? Absolutely not. So it says the Chafetz Chaim, according to the Tam of Shulchan Aruch, can you just drop the basket inside, fit it in the kli, and now it has a nice tefach on the bottom? Absolutely yes, because there's no need for shinui, and Maran's reason is shinui. So if you follow the logic of Maran of Shulchan Aruch, it should be mutar in that case to have the kefifa mitzrit, even though that it is sealing upon the bottom of the kli with a tefach in between them or more. But says the Chafetz Chaim quickly afterwards, Mimela mutar la'agbi'a kfifa tefach v'yoter, but it says, he refers you to bi'ur halacha right over here, shebe'arnu d'arbe rishonim sovrin d'tam shesarich shlo yeh kfifa gavoa tefach u'mishum chashash ohel. Now this is not the only reason. Maran paskins like this, correct, but there are many rishonim who hold the reason of not having the kfifa mitzrit sealing over the bottom of the kli with a tefach or more between them is because of good old halachot of ohel. And the halachot of ohel do not differentiate between how pure your drink is that you're pouring into kfifa mitzrit. It's a completely separate halacha. And even if you're pouring clear wine or clear water inside, still would be asur to do ohel on top of your kli.
The problem for Mr. Sudar too, for the last one, they said you have to stretch it on top of the cup. If the cup is more than a tefach and you put that, stretch it on top of the cup, is again a ohel.
So we spoke about that in Siman Shin Tet Vav. Please take a look at there, with all the details of when you have a sudar, if it's for cleanliness, if it's for this, if it's for that. We spoke about all of the details of that, but yes, potentially could become a problem there as well. Now, what Mishnah Berurah is going to write right now could be a solution for kfiva mitzrit and for the other one as well. So it says the Mishnah Berurah, there are those who say, those Rishonim, ayin, bebiru halacha, that the ta'am could be because of chashash ohel, the shiuro b'tefach, that the height of an ohel has to be a minimum of tefach, and hence, the kfifa mitzrit, who is now going to be a hard sealing upon the bottom of your other kli, could be an issue of ohel. But if he's there, according to this reasoning of the Rishonim, doesn't make a difference how clear your wine or water is. It's going to be a problem across the board. V'da de'leinyan asiyat ohel lo shayach bazeh ela k'shmechaseh b'hakifa kol halal hakli. As we spoke in Siman Shin Tet Vav, is only if you're covering the entire area of the opening of the kli. If you do halfway, even if you have more than a tefach, still mutar, right? But if you hold this basket with one hand, right, over this kli, and it's not covering the entire area, and then with your other hand you pour the wine or water inside, sifting them, that would be completely mutar. Even though that you have most of the kli covered with the kfifa mitzrit, still would be fine, because halachot of ohel requires that the whole kli is covered for it to be ohel. Here is a partial cover is not an issue. Says the Mishnah Berurah, I have an eitzah for you. Hold it with one hand, pour with the other hand. Even if you have more than a tefach on the bottom, that would be still mutar. And that covers also the reasoning of shinui as well, because again, this is not what you would do on a weekday. A weekday you would just drop the basket on top of the kli and pour the wine inside, and now you're holding it in your hand and pouring with the other hand. That would be considered, of course, a proper and legitimate shinui of change, and therefore it will be mutar according to Maran Shulchan Aruch as well. Shinui mikre ubifrat im haya salud, especially if the wine is clear, the water is clean, the en sarich that you don't even need to change anything. The ubadin dechol does not even apply in those cases. Ochmo shekatavnu, just like we wrote already. Now,
what is today's application?
Today's application. So, as we mentioned, you have lots of things, and we're going to speak about them in Sif Yud Gimel mainly right now, that well, first of all, for beginners, if you have a wine that you want to strain, because of whatever that it's mixed with it, you could have a case that a beer bottle or wine bottle cracked on the top, right? Or a Coke bottle, the glass ones. You put it in the freezer, or one of those the sparkling waters, right? Yeah, so you forgot to put them in the fridge, and guests are coming in half an hour, and you stick them in the freezer to cool them off, and then the guests come, and they're more interesting than you thought they would be, and you're schmoozing, and then you forget until you hear pop, right? And now you have water that the top of it is broken, shards of glass maybe inside, maybe not, and you want to sift it, right? So how do you do that? Exactly. Well, you would drink the water on the top. It's drinkable, technically speaking, right? Because any glass would probably, hopefully, you would hope, would sink to the bottom. Right? You don't want to try that at home. So even though that people would drink it, probably, if you're not too sensitive. Again, we mentioned according to the Primi Gadim, it goes after the person, right? We discussed that. So you could have many practical scenarios that this will become actually something that you would want to do. And so I want to sift it. How do you want to sift it? I want to put it through something to make sure that it's doesn't have any shards in it, or you have bottles of wine that could have some mixture. And you want to make sure that they're a little bit clearer than they are right now. So that would be, or you have, let's say, pulp, but not the ones, the orange juice that have a lot of pulp, but they have like a medium. But you have a kid that doesn't want it with the thing. Most people would have it with regular amount of pulp. Let's say you want to sift them, So these are things that you could deal with on daily basis, on a regular kitchen. So, but we're gonna be dealing with some related items in the next saif, and that's if Yud Gimel. So it says the Mishnah Leishcha Aruch, Klish Ma'arin Bo Yain Me'achavit. You have a vessel that you pour wine in it from the large barrel of wine. Lo yiten bepiv kashin uksamin bechazka she'en lecha mesanenet gadol mize. You should not be putting, stuffing, straws and things of that nature in the opening of that vessel. This because this way you're sifting the wine that you pour inside. So even though that's not a sifter, but you just created your own makeshift, your own homemade sifter by stuffing the kli with things that would stop any major mix of particles that are in the wine. So therefore, that would be asur, even though that you don't have a mesameret, you don't have a mesaneret, you have a meshameret, it still would be asur, because it doesn't make a difference if you have a mesaneret or not. You are actually sifting this, and that would be a problem. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Rotzeh lomar afilu me'erev Shabbat. This does not make a difference if you even make the mesaneret on erev Shabbat, because you're pouring it on Shabbat. So the fact that you already set up the whole system from Erev Shabbat makes no difference, because the act is being done on Shabbat. Of course, again, for the third time he's mentioning this, we're talking about a wine that has some sediment, some drag, some particles that are unwanted mixed with it, because if it was salul, with completely clear, nice wine, and you just want to fine-tune it a little bit, then it would be fine even to do it with an actual mesanenet, and therefore will be no problem whatsoever. If you have a clear wine and you want to sift it a little further, רק מפרק סמין דקין שבו, אף במשמרת ממש מותר. Then you could actually do it with a professional sifter even. For sure you could do it with, make believe this things that you stuffed on the opening of the kli. That's for sure. That's not as good as mesanenet. And you could do this with mamash with the mesanenet, so of course you could do it with this method as well. As we discussed already this in Seif Yud, right? Now, bechazka, that you're stuffing the opening with the straws and so on, the derech hu litchof piv bechozek k'desh yakvu ha'ksamim v'tinofot mila'avor v'al ken hu ke'en meshameret. The tighter you stuff it, the more it sifts. So that's why they would do that, to make sure that it sifts the most amount possible from all the drags and all the smaller particles. The more tightly packed it is, the smaller the particles that it could catch. So therefore, it will become a problem. When it says she'en lecha mesanenet, when it says you can't have a better mesanenet than this, that's really not. It's kind of like a lav davka. It's not an exact language, because this is not as good as meshamer. At the end of the day, this is not a professional sifter. So the Mishnah Berurah goes back and forth to twist the language and say it means that it is as good almost as a meshamer, not that this is the best meshamer ever. It's not. But Maran writes that it's considered like a meshamer. That's what he means, says the Mishnah Berurah over here, without spending a whole lot of time going through it. Now, here we have, of course, a lot to discuss, because the Shcharuch basically says that you cannot wedge and stuff this straws inside the opening of a kli, and the explanation that the poskim give, if you take a look at Machatzit Shekel over here, it's brought by the poskim as well, is that the particles and bits and pieces of the settlement, that the dregs of the wine, and therefore, the Gemara is referring to the overall state of affairs here, and it's not even though it's not a perfect filter, it still would be asur. But Rashi over here is referring to the particles that are sifted through, pointing out the fact that it's definitely worthy of being called a filter, even though that's not going to filter out everything, every little detail, right? Now, what's the halacha if that's the case, that you can't stuff something and then pour from it? What would be the halacha with tea kettles? So we spoke about this briefly in the previous shiur, and we even really referenced it in shiurim before that as well. So tea kettle, especially for Sfaradim and English people, becomes some of the British. They have tea, they walk around with the tea kettle. They have 11 o'clock tea. They have, I don't know how many teas they have a day. So for those tea lovers, tea kettles becomes a big problem, because according to this seif that we just learned, what should be the halacha for tea kettles? You basically have a bottle that in the spout, when the opening of it, you stuffed it with something that when you pour out, it sifts. And that's exactly a tea kettle. It should be asur, right? According to what we just said, teapots who have a filter in the beginning of their spout when it's connected with the actual tea kettle, that sifting and holding back the tea leaves from pouring into your cup, that should be a problem, should be asur. But the Chazon Ish writes, surprisingly, right? I should say uncharacteristically, the Chazon Ish writes that this is mutar. Why? Because no one really cares about the spout with the filter, right? You're not using the sieve, the sifter over there, even though that it's positioned in a way that it's going to sift, but it's really equivalent of sifting and separating with your hands, and it will be mutar when you are removing the food from the bad, the good from the bad. That's how Chazon Ish says it. Now, how to understand this Chazon Ish? Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, not trying to explain the Chazon Ish, but nevertheless, it seems like he's explaining the same thing. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, and this is brought in Rav Neubert's Sefer Shemeshah Kilchatam, and became a famous shita of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He says that a kli, and this is a fundamental kula, which you will love, and you can use in other places as well. It's like a real fundamental yesod because it's a rule, not just a application. Says Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, any kli that's made not for sifting, but it's a kli for achila, like you're pouring into your cup a drink to drink. It's not sifting for putting the tea away, like any sifter. What do you use sifters for? Sifters la asur. It's a sifter that you do as a process by itself, not as a part of eating process. But you sift and you can put it away. You never pour tea from a tea kettle, a teapot, and say, "Oh, now I have this tea without the leaves. I'm going to put it away." No one does that. This is made for pouring tea to drink. So now I put some holes there, and it kind of like helps a little bit sifting. Nah, it doesn't even do a perfect job, but hold back some of the tea leaves. That's not considered a sifter, says Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and therefore it will be mutar, right? If you take a look at the top of your page 61, that's what we're going to be learning over here in the name of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach as well, that it's not a kli that's specifically used for borer. It's part of my drinking tea process, not part of sifting and putting away. It's not a kli, it's made separate for immediate use. And that's how the kli is designed. The tea kettle is designed for immediate use. And as we mentioned before, you remember the whole Ma'aritz and the Rishonim that we discussed of the Ritba and so on, of using it right away, Marach Abulafia. Here also is a kli, says Rav Shlomo Zalman, that's made for eating, for immediate use, not for sifting necessarily. And therefore, says Rav Shlomo Auerbach, that would be mutar. You could use a teapot with a strainer attached to its spout, and it's possible to use it because it's not a sifter. And that may be the reason the Chazon Ish is mentioning over here as well.
Food.
Say it again?
It's not a sifter because it's used for food.
No, because immediate use. In other words, it's not saying that you could use a sifter for immediate use either. In other words, it's not saying that I could have a sifter as long as I want to eat the products right away. No, because the sifter is a sifter. But here, we're talking about a kli that is made for immediate use.
It's sifting.
It is sifting, somewhat, right?
It's exactly
but it's
sifting.
not a kli that's made for immediate for sifting. It's a kli that's made for immediate use of drinking tea.
It's made for sifting out the tea leaves, so you could
For immediate use,
Yeah.
right? So it doesn't mean that you could go and take a sifter, so long as you want to immediately use it. It doesn't mean that.
But then you could take.
But it means that if a kli is made for immediate use, the kli itself is made for immediate use, that's not a sifter that the Torah answered.
So if you
Right? It's part and parcel of my drinking tea. I wouldn't sift or strain tea and keep it for later use and use the teapot for doing that. It's not what it's made for. It's made for, I want to drink tea, so it's like it holds back some of the things for me to to be able to have a clear tea.
How's it different than using a sifter to separate out sediments that nobody would eat for wine? If you had a kli that did that and you said if it's for immediate use, it should be okay.
No, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. The sifter, the meshameret, is not made for immediate use necessarily. You could sift something and put it for 10 years from now, for 10 hours from now.
I'm saying if you had a kli
That's why the meshameret, the sifter is made for sifting, regardless of when it's going to be used. You could use it now, you could use it anyway. And therefore, even if you want to use it within 5 seconds, you cannot use it in Meshameret. Because you're using a kli for borer. A kli that was made for borer.
So if you had like a tea kettle.
But says Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, if all it is made for drinking right now, it's not a sifter that you would use for future. It's not a sifter. Sifters are vessels that are used for separation, and separation would be la'niach also. You could use it now, you could use it later. The purpose is sifting, good from bad, bad from good, and you could use it for later as well. Whereas a teapot is for drinking tea.
So these coffee sifters, that would be the same halacha? Let's say like this brewer or whatever it is, but that's also made for immediate use.
Okay.
So that would be mutter. According to this, it should come out that that's also mutter because.
Well, it's not necessarily for immediate use because you brewing coffee right now, and you could have it for cold coffee later on. You have iced coffee later on.
Is it totally on the mindset? Let's say a person is using it for. I guess it would go busted right. Because there are people that use it right now. They put it in a small sifter, put the coffee in, and they make the coffee. So I guess in these big machines, I guess it's used for a long time. But if a person has a personal one, it's used for right now.
I'm saying that's very difficult to differentiate between the size of it, and also it's not the kli exactly that's a container. This is the process of brewing coffee. It's very different than having tea with leaves inside mixed. And partially also, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is not necessarily the only reason that we do this. If you remember last time we discussed, the main reason that Achronim take seriously is because it's not really doing me any favors, because I could drink the tea with the leaves inside, no problem, right? Now, if you want to be a little finicky and fine, I have no problem putting some tea leaves inside my tea, and they'll settle down on the bottom, and I'll have my tea, and it's no problem. Whereas if you have try to put this coffee inside a cup of water and see if you could drink anything, right? You can't. It would be rejected from drinking by the vast majority of almost every single person, right? So therefore, it would be very different in that case versus this case, right? So tea leaves and teapots are multiple reasons why the poskim are willing to be mekel with them, not just the shita of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. But what I'm saying is that even within Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is very different than the coffee sifters. The coffee sifter, the cloth that you put there, the disposable cloth, or even the metal ones that they are made for, it's a kli made specifically for straining and sifting. And you don't need to use it necessarily right away. You can use it for any time, right? But a teapot is not made for that. Teapot is not made for straining. It's like once you're pouring to drink it, we want to assist you a little bit to have a clearer thing. But it's not really made for sifting. Whereas the sifter is made for sifting. You could put the coffee for later and warm it up, or you have the iced coffee. You need to use the sifter. So it's very fundamentally very different than the spout of the tea kettle, right? So there's two reasons to it. So same thing would be with a salt shaker as well, right? A salt shaker, if you put some rice in it, and we mentioned this is the old way to use when it pours, it rains, it pours, right? You didn't need those things beforehand. You just put a few grains of dried rice inside, and that would do the job. Put 20, 30 grains of rice inside your salt shaker, and it kind of like soaks all the moist inside, and your salt would be nice and dry, and you pour out of the salt shaker. So that would be, but salt shaker, when you do that, is holding back the rice, allowing the salt, so you're sifting through the mixture. Is that mutar or not? So according to this, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach will be the same svara over there as well. Right? We have in past said other logics for why salt shaker with rice would be mutar, refer to the previous shiurim that we explained this at length. Now, filter on a tab would be also mutar if the water is drank by most people, right? Even in Los Angeles, that the water is one of the top 8 dirty places, I think it is, if I'm not mistaken. It will be still fine to do it because, if you need to, if you're thirsty, you have tap water, even though that we are very much cultured into using purified water or spring water or pH water and all those good things that are available for good Jews. But if you don't have them available, you will have a tap water, no problem. And therefore, it would be mutar to have a sifter upon your tap. Now, we have to talk about the New York water a little bit more at length. We mentioned it before. New York water is filled with creatures, right? And it's not a secret. The government knows about it and they don't want to do anything about it because they want those creatures inside the reservoirs because they accomplish other good things, preventing the surface of water from other infestations and other issues. So therefore they want them there, and they're not known to have any damage for human system, so therefore they just keep them there. As long as you don't look at it, you don't see the guzzilos swimming in, and you don't pay attention to it, it will be just fine, right? And you could live your whole life in New York City drinking the water and not even knowing that these things are there, because they're pretty clear, but you can see them with naked eye if you're looking for them. And becomes a whole question. Is this bugs? Is it eating bugs? Is it not being looked? So that becomes a question that we're going to discuss actually in the next Sa'if in Shchar, Sa'if Tetvav. We haven't gotten there fully, but regular filtering the tap water, it's fine. There's no problem with that. Now how about if you have like a reverse osmosis filter system on the bottom of your sink? It's mash like one of these, or the ones that we have in the shul, other people have in commercial places. That's like 5 to 10 different systems of filtering from one to another, more and more fine-tuned, so the water you get is like pretty good at the end. What's the halacha with that? That also would be lichora muter, even that you're mamash using the sifter, because again, would be the water that we have, they're all clear, and most people would be okay drinking it. Now, there are 2 reasons that sifters and professional filters will be mutar. One is because you can't see the psolet really. With naked eye, you can't see all the lead and all the this and that, the other. It's not visible really to naked eye. And therefore it would be mutar. If you're sifting, you have to have it as a purified water, and so on and so forth. If there's nothing else, you will still drink it. So therefore, even those who are extremely makpid underwater, let them starve and be thirsty for a day, and they would drink anything. They would drink that at least. Maybe that's too far-fetched. Even namash in sakana. So that would be the difference. This water is pretty clear. Of course, again, the Pri Megadim was the source of saying, which we learned about this before in the previous shiur, that it's very subjective and it goes after yourself. So if you're very sensitive and very finicky about it, it will be a problem. But even that, if you are debating a certain item and it becomes solid for you, it will become a problem. Here, regular water is not even in that category, because you would drink it if you need to. It's not a big problem whatsoever in that case, and therefore having professional filters on your water of the home or anywhere else that you are on Shabbat, you can use that. There's no problem with it. Now, there's some of the newer filters, they actually, when you turn the water on, there's a LED light that goes on. Those are very easy to separate. You could, if you know how to just open it up and take the battery off or the light off, that would be fine. Because that you cannot do. That's at the very least, without getting into what problems you could run into, but that of course is a problem on Shabbat. But it's easy to separate the light from the filter, so this way nothing's going on as you do that. And there's another potential issue as well. Some of them have a digital count out. Some of the newer systems in East Coast, the governments in East Coast are trying this, that the whole water of the house is like that. That instead of having the the rotating original manual things as digital, and every time that you open the tap water, even the digital count out is reading, and it's changing. Is that mutar on Shabbat, not mutar on Shabbat? What to do about it and not is a different thing for Hilchot Kotev, really, and for the Gramas and Koach Shenis and so on and so forth, which is a complicated shiur, not for now. But that basically is the halakha. And even if you want to be machmir on the filters, when you have a filtered jog, that certainly would be mutar. That's more of a heter than a filtering system, because again, you have the heter of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach of a teapot by this as well. I'm talking about the pitchers that have a filter inside, and as you pour, it filters out. That would be more of a heter than a regular filtering system, because you have also the addition of the Chazon Ish / Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that it's a kli that's not made for filtering necessarily, but for drinking water, and it filters it as the water goes inside. It's not for keeping filtered water afterwards. So it's not in that logic of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. It will be a little bit better. And
Over there, it's made for a long time. The pitchers that have water, it's not necessarily made for it's with the next time I need water, I filter it now. For it could be tomorrow, it could be in 2 days.
people don't do that. They just keep it in the pitcher and you pour it whenever you need it.
Right, so it's not for immediate use then.
Yeah, but it's not filtering it right now. You filter it only when you're about to drink it, right?
They put water in it and it filters and just sits in the pitcher. It goes down and it's filtered already. It goes to the bottom and it's filtered, and people use it throughout the day.
Oh, not the ones that are filtered as it pours out. The two different ways of what you have. There are those he's talking about here, the ones that as you pour it filters out, not the ones that you filter it as you pour it into the pitcher necessarily. Yeah, and achinami, that would be
Those ones that
that would be a bigger problem. Yeah, achinami. Again, we left off some issues still of using the lids for sifting through soups and vegetable water and so on and so forth, which we're going to continue in the next year.